We are going today cover how to put our rawhide back on our bow blank. And so we have basically tillered our cedar bow, our cedar longbow, to be pulling to about string height. So that's where we are in the tillering process. So basically got it to the string. Now is the time to get started on our rawhide. So this is the rawhide we will be using. It is elk rawhide, purchased at the leather store. It was a much larger piece, of course, and I have cut strips out over time. Okay, I have my 2 strips cut out. Couple different methods I used for doing that. For my initial cut, I used a very heavy-duty pair of shears, but I will tell you, that was a little too much work to get through all of that. Second go around, I went ahead and ran those strips through the bandsaw just to take it down quick. At this point, and before we soak them, we're going to scrape the flesh side of our pieces here, and this is kind of a good example of what we're trying to remove. So you can see that there's just this membrane, this membrane that's across the entire length of these pieces. And so we're going to get in here with a knife to scrape all of this clear, because that will interfere with the glue. I don't know if that's like collagen or what it is, hardened up, but no matter what it is, it will interfere with our glue adhesion. So I have clamped down the rawhide just to hold it flat for me, so it's not springing around everywhere and acting like an eel out of water while I'm trying to handle it. You can see here where I've kind of got to start on what it is I'm trying to accomplish here, and that's just scraping the flesh side of this length. And don't be too afraid, guys. You're not going to scrape through it, all right? Unless your blade is way too sharp and you're slicing, you're not going to scrape through it. You do want a pretty sharp blade, and as you can see, it starts taking this sort of membrane off, and when I let the light from the outside come through, you can see where it's kind of shiny here and hits this dull spot. This right here kind of is a good example of what it is we're removing, so you get an idea of what that looks like. Okay, so this stuff should be coming off of. So this is about what we should be aiming for. Lots of material that has come off of this surface, and actually kind of gives a little bit of a, almost like a leathery feel to it. Like it's actually kind of softened a bit versus like a hard shell kind of thing. Now, as I worked down with the knife blade, this is what took, you know, the majority of the, I don't know what you want to call this, the flesh or whatever off of there. I also came back after it with a spring steel scraper, and it takes material just like it would off of a piece of wood, and just kind of got all of the little nooks and crannies out of there. So really kind of smoothed down flat. Finished with the scraper. Worked a little bit with some little divot areas with that particular scraper as I was moving along. Just a real quick view of the before and after. Okay, so you can see just kind of a milky clear surface on one side, and then just kind of a mess on the other, for lack of any better way of describing it. We're going to address the ends of the rawhide here that are going to meet at the grip, and so I need to put a nice skive joint on here. So I'm going to show you how I do that. Before I soak it in the water, we're going to go ahead and mill it on the just on the sander here. I had a little bit of struggle with this particular piece, but it was already, this is very thin already, so it's going to lay up very well underneath there. And then got probably a skive of about ½ an inch long on here, so this is going to lay down pretty flat, and we should have a pretty good overlap at the grip without any bumps at the transition area. I've got my stave set out here, and I have freshly sanded the back surface and made sure that I don't have any major, you know, hills or valleys or bumps or dips in there, and as best I can, kind of got it a bit of a crown to it. So sanded with 50 grit paper, because it is a soft wood. It handles a heavier grit much better. It does more softening with a heavy grit. Going to use Type Bond 3 for this application. So Type Bond 3 is a water soluble glue that when it cures and dries, it dries waterproof. So we can clean up our tools with water, and we can clean off the bow with water while it's wet. And once it is dried underneath the, when the joint is dry, it'll be waterproof. So we don't have to worry about any moisture compromising our backing strips. Backing strips have been sanded down on the, sanded down, however you want to look at it, on the flesh side. It's going to be the flesh side that is applied to the bow. I have rolled gauze. So this is just a cotton gauze, and what we're going to use this for is when we glue our backing down, we are going to use the gauze as our binding. So we're going to wrap this with gauze to help hold it down, but also to let the air get to it so that the moisture can wick out of our rawhide. So the rawhide is going to be soaked in water for 20 minutes before we apply it to the back. So it's going to be a very wet operation. And we'll put it down, we'll wrap it with the gauze. The gauze gives it the opportunity to dry, to air dry, quicker than, say, if we were to wrap it with, well, in the past, I have used rubber bands, kind of like how I glue my bamboo. And what that would do is it would make it hard to dry underneath the rubber, number one. And number two, you would see the lines of the rubber bands in the finished product, because it would compress the wet rawhide and leave you with like a, look like a candy cane striping on the bow itself. And that's a lot to have to take out. So I don't like that. We're going with this. It will not leave evident lines in the finished product, number one. Number two, it'll allow it to dry quicker or more evenly and thoroughly. Okay, what I have here is 1 cup just with some water in it, another empty cup. Got our glue. And what we're going to do is size out this joint, or what they call sizing the joint. And what it is, we just got full-on glue right here. In this 1 cup, we're going to add a little bit of water, and what we're trying to do is just thin that glue down to the degree that it's, just like a, not even like a slurry, but just wet. And the idea with it being wet is we're going to brush this onto our glue joint here. And the reason that we do this is so that that grain will eat up this layer of glue, and it'll leave just a ever so slightly tacky surface here. And really it'll dry up not tacky, but what we're doing is creating a bit of a barrier so that when we go through and do the actual gluing process, the glue itself will not soak into the wood and then starve the actual glue joint. So what this does is ensure that the glue stays on the surface of our back and adheres to the backing strips, the rawhide, or any other backing strip that you're putting on. And so this is a very important step on your wood surfaces. The rawhide is not going to soak up glue like wood will. So I've done one limb. I'm going to turn this around and go ahead and put a sizing layer of glue on this second side. Let that dry while we soak the rawhide. We're going to put some warm water in here just to the depth to cover the rawhide, and let it soak then for about 20 minutes, and we will be ready to glue our project together. I have my top limb situated here first, so I'm going to take out my longer piece here. It's going to be this one. Somewhere on here at one time it said top. Anyway, we're going to try and wring out as much of the water as we can from this. I don't know how much of this you can actually see. I'm just trying to get the water back into the pot there. It is a wet operation, but it does not need to be a sloppy operation. All right, guys, so notice how much longer this has stretched. I don't know if I cut it just to barely overhang the tip, and it is a good 4 inches past. And so we can expect that much contraction when it starts to finish. All right, so we're going to start here at the grip, and I'm just going to apply the glue straight on. Oops. Now at the tip in particular, we want to make sure that we don't put the binding on it right away. And the reason being that we are going to be overlapping that tip, so or that at the grip with the other piece of rawhide. And so I'm going to just clamp it on here with a clamp, because what we're going to do is during the entire time that we're working this, we're going to continue to stretch this, and we don't want it to interfere with our pulling it up the length of the limb. All right, so here we go. I'm going to just put on a generous amount of glue here. Brush this on here really good. And we want a nice thick layer. Now, where I live in Denver, the air is incredibly dry, and especially today this is the case. And so I got to work kind of fast here and be liberal with the glue itself. All right. Take that out. So in essence, it doesn't hurt to even add a little bit of water to this. Okay. I'm going to also, if this is off screen, and I apologize, guys, I'm going to put just a real quick layer on the rawhide itself. Not much, actually, and truthfully, not enough to even be consequential. All right, so here we go. We want to really always be massaging it toward the edges and toward the tip. All right, so you can see how that, oops, hang on. Pull down on my vise. And I've got another clamp out here, and the reason I'm doing this clamp is to actually hold the rawhide out here so it doesn't try to pull back. All right, and so here we go. Make sure that we start at the top of the grip so we do not interfere with the with the next straps, or with the next piece that's going down. All right. And keeping good tension on this is going to be key. So as you wrap, you want to make sure that the edges of the rawhide are lipping down off of either side. And we're going to want to more or less stretch this gauze to its limit. And once you've got it down, you'll want to come back across it, and to the best of your ability, ensure that you've got glue going all the way across your edges here. And probably be working to manipulate it like opposite to the way you were wrapping it, just to ensure that we got good adhesion or good glue distribution really across the whole length there. Here we are, all glued up, and then induced a little bit of reflex here on both ends. All right, just kind of bound down the grip and propped up the tips. Here would be the first side that we wrapped, or that I wrapped, and looks like a tattered old mummy. Here, of course, is the second side that looks all orderly and smooth and etc. So this would, of course, be the desired outcome here, and part of what allowed me to get that outcome was that I kept the roll in the roll as I was going around, and I went in the opposite direction of what I did on camera, which is a little more natural for me to try and operate in any event. So here we are. We're going to let this dry overnight, completely cure out, and then tomorrow we'll come back to it. All right, guys, we've allowed this bow to dry overnight, and going to find out what kind of reflex it kept. I suspect that maybe it might retain maybe an inch or so of the reflex that we kind of induced here. That's actually more than I anticipated right there. Not a bad deal. Not a bad deal at all. Looks like more by 1.5 inches, maybe almost 2 inches. I really don't have any intention of using this binding more than once, so it's really not a big deal to me. It's cheap enough to just replace each time we plan on doing a project. Yeah, which is good because it's sticking everywhere. So I'm going to go ahead and get this unwrapped, and we'll make sure that we got a good adhesion through both of the limbs, and go from there. So guys, when it comes to cleaning up the edges of your rawhide, the part that's kind of draped over the side of your bow here, there's a number of different ways you can go about doing that. You can take after it. I've gone after it with a file to get it thin, or a rasp rather, and then file it to kind of get the finished look to it. I've also taken a spoke shave to it, and I would tell you that a spoke shave makes very quick work of this. You just work it like you're working even the belly. It's gonna ride along the bumps and whatnot as you go, but then as you start getting moving, it's taking off nice even ribbons and getting you good even removal until you get right down to the wood, and then you can be very careful about how that you know, just how close you get to your edge. And of course, probably chamfer it a little on the side of the rawhide, just for the safety of not getting into the wood itself of the edge of your bow. So go ahead and take your rawhide down as best you can with the tools you got. And once you're all cleaned up on your edges, you're able to reestablish the string nocks, and then we can move forward with tillering. So I'm going to get this cleaned up. That's going to be the end of this particular video. Be sure to like and subscribe. You can catch up with me on the next episode where we start tillering this guy and taking it to the finishing phases.